welcome to Gazali. Today we have a very special person on this show. A few days ago, Cantave walks in my Museum of Goa. He's a young black man from New York, and he likes the museum, and he looks at a Gandhi app which we have created. So you point a phone to a podium with some design, and then you see a sculpture of Gandhi standing on the podium. He gets very interested in that, and he says, "Why have you done this? What is the story behind this?" And then I narrate to him my fascination with Mahatma Gandhi's life and a lot of work which I have been doing with Mahatma Gandhi. And this young man turns out to be an activist in America, fighting for the oppressed brown and black people. I must brief my audience about some basic history of America in this regards. The slavery was abolished in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. There's this Civil War. The Civil War ended. There's a famous speech of Abraham Lincoln on the battlefield of Gettysburg, which was one of the most important battles fought in the Civil War, and I had an opportunity to visit there. And I really love this speech where Lincoln sort of talks about his dream of having a nation where everybody is equal. So we have the slavery abolished. Almost 100 years later, it's still not abolished. And we have Martin Luther King in 1960s, who fights another battle, and some more rights are given to the black population. Today we are in 2023, and yet there is a lot of oppression which happens to the colored people in America. And that's what boils the blood of my young friend Glenn. And he has taken it upon himself to fight it out. So Glenn, welcome to Gazali, and it was a very great pleasure meeting you, especially when you told me that you fasted for 30 days in Times Square in New York, taking only water, for Black Lives Matters. And that really got my interest alive. So tell me now, what are the kind of oppressions which are faced by the colored and the black people of America?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It felt incredibly serendipitous seeing the augmented reality Gandhi app just in relation to the work that I do with Kinfolk. And our goal is to inspire a more equitable future, because oppression has not stopped whatsoever. Especially with black and brown folk in the United States, the origin really starts with the genesis of slavery and patriarchy and white supremacy introduced into the United States. And while slavery at face value is over, our plight is not. We are restricted in terms of economic opportunities. By the year 2050, the median black income is going to average zero if we continue at our current rates.
So you see oppression as far as in different fields, like one is education.
Yes.
The blacks have no education, not schools as good as the whites.
Yes.
Then?
Yes, so our schools are underfunded, our neighborhoods are food deserts where there's not adequate health care, our neighborhoods are designed where they're structurally near factories and highways, so a lot of black kids have higher rates of asthma. Whether it's the police that arbitrarily kill us without reason on video with evidence and get no consequences. At every level, there are structural reasons why black people and brown people are pushed back and held back in America.
In spite of Obama, a black person becoming the president of America.
Yes, a black man can reach the highest office in the land, and the plight of the average black man may not change. That is what was proven with the presidency.
That is what is happening. Okay. So, we live in times, actually also in India, where history is being challenged. Histories are written normally by the conquerors. They always say the until the lion could write, it will be also always the hunter's history. What hunter writes is the truth about the hunting scenario. So you have a serious problem, obviously, with the history of America, the way the popular history of America, what everybody learns, and you want to change that. So you have a problem, for example, with Christopher Columbus statue in New York. So tell us about this.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. History is written by the quote-unquote victors, right? And they perpetuate narratives that dehumanize and other Black and brown people. When you dehumanize us, it's easier to take away resources from us, right? So instead of being educated kings and queens in different parts of Africa, we're seen as nothing, right? So Christopher Columbus, in one light, he's seen as an explorer, he's seen as someone who discovered a land that people already lived on, right? But at the end of the day, for many, he is a symbol of genocide, of patriarchy, of white supremacy, and he's the reason why I personally don't know my origins or my real last name. And so reframing these narratives so that people understand from a broad perspective what the foundation of these oppressive systems really mean is critical to us realizing an equitable future.
So you have chosen Christopher Columbus as a symbol. Christopher Columbus actually discovered the sea route. We learned in India, in the schools, about the adventure of Christopher Columbus crossing the Atlantic and discovering new land. And so we learned it as a hero who discovered. Now, whatever happened later is not only because of Christopher Columbus, because of so many people who went there. Christopher Columbus found a new land because there was more opportunity, more money might be coming out of that. That was the objective of Christopher Columbus. And I think he died also thinking that he has discovered India. Because he never realized that he had discovered America. He died. I mean, he went to his grave with a belief that he had discovered India, which he had not. That was left for Vasco da Gama to do that. So he had chosen him as a symbol because there have been many, many things which happened after the discovery of the sea route by Columbus. And there must have been thousands of other villains who are responsible for wiping off the local population. That was the first stage. The second stage was cultivation of sugarcane and other things for which the slaves were brought, the transatlantic slave trade. That's what brought your ancestors to that land. So why only Christopher Columbus as a symbol?
Well, the first thing I'd push back on is the fact that he discovered anything. I don't think you can discover land that
sea
people
route.
were already
No,
on.
he didn't discover land. He discovered the sea route.
Sea route, that's even debatable. There's arguments that Zheng He or Leif Erikson of other countries have done the same thing.
Okay.
But all of that aside,
fine. That's that is beyond our debate.
Fair enough. But all of that aside, everyone in the United States knows who Christopher Columbus is. There are two individuals with national holidays in the United States: Christopher Columbus and Dr. King. Like king of oppression, king of liberty. Two very different folk, right? And so to have a focal point in terms of who to focus the energy on when we're talking about these complex topics of white supremacy, of oppression, of patriarchy, it makes sense to start at the origin of all of this. And in this case, it was Christopher Columbus. And then for me as well, it's a personal story because my family is from Haiti and because the decisions that he and others made, like that series of decisions is the reason why I'm here. So it's personal, but it's also a broader tactic. That's not specifically about the statue, but about deconstructing the narrative itself.
There are many other statues which you want to get rid of, especially of generals who were responsible for killing a lot of blacks during the Civil War. But at the same time, I was just thinking about it. Of course, those generals, it was a war between the South and the North. The South represented slavery and the North wanted emancipation of the slaves. And there were lots of white people also died for this cause. When Lincoln made that famous speech, which I have with me here, on the battlefield of Gettysburg, he basically talks about the sacrifice of so many soldiers. And I think majority of those soldiers were white, who died for the cause of emancipation of the slaves. Am I right?
I don't see it exactly that way. I'm paraphrasing here, but what Lincoln's ultimate goal was to preserve the Union. So, for example, there was a group of states that were slave states, but they still remained in the Union, and they fought against the Confederate Army themselves. And so, paraphrasing here, Lincoln essentially said that my goal is to preserve the Union. If I can do it by keeping slavery, I will do it. If I can do it by abolishing slavery, I will do it. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the people who were fighting on the side of the Union Army were doing it for the sake of the abolition of slavery. It's wonderful that that happened as a result, but it was more about patriotism and preserving the economic stronghold that a unified United States would have had versus them being separate.
Okay. Okay, so now there are many statues. So can you name a few statues which you want out?
Oh, okay. I know we don't have all day, but I'll name a few for sure.
One in Virginia.
Yeah, and so for example, Robert E. Lee, he was the general of the Confederate Army. There are statues of him all over the country. It doesn't make sense to me that someone who committed treason against the country is being glorified. Other generals such as Stonewall Jackson, another general in the Confederate Army, makes absolutely no sense why someone like that is there. Of course, there's Christopher Columbus, and in certain cases, this is controversial. But for me, I think this is where you need to add context to a situation. Someone like Susan B. Anthony, who was a liberator for women's rights and fought for women's suffrage. It's an incredible thing that she did. However, her scope of it was for white women specifically, and there are many cases of how she looked down upon and disrespected black women, right? So if we're talking about, the deification of a person in the form of a monument, let's tell the whole story.
So tell me, our conversations yesterday started with you in a church, a black church in Virginia, and outside there was a big demonstration of the white supremacists, Nazis, neo-Nazis. Tell us about that day. This was in 2017.
Yes, so it was August of 2017. It was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and that's when the city decided to remove two statues of General Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. And so there was a decentralized group of white supremacists, including Nazis, that came together, and they were planning to hold a rally called the Unite the Right Rally. And the night before, I was in a church, and we were told that we were not allowed to leave the church because there were demonstrators with tiki torches outside. I thought they were going to burn the church. I didn't know what was going to happen, and there was a general panic there for sure.
They also were with machine guns.
The next day they were with machine guns. As far as I know, that night they were with the tiki torches. We were able to safely evacuate that day, but the next day they were arranged in military formations. People had shields and fully loaded machine guns, different handguns all over them. And we were peaceful protesters. Speaking for myself anyway, I was recording for a virtual reality documentary. I didn't engage in any fighting, but it seemed like they were ready, that if we were going to shoot, they were definitely going to shoot. And what they did actually is one of them drove a car into 19 protesters, and one of the protesters, Heather Hare, lost her life that day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the mayor of New York appointed a committee after this.
Yeah, so it was in the aftermath of this riot in Charlottesville where the mayor decided to create a commission to analyze all statues and monuments of hate in New York City to see what would actually be removed.
And the statue of Lee was moved to a museum.
Yeah.
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 Huh?
But not in New York though, not in New York. So basically what actually ended up happening was J. Marion Sims, he was known as the founder of gynecology, but he actually performed experiments on black women's genitals without any anesthesia because his theory is that black women could feel no pain. So that's how he found a lot of his insights. A statue of him was removed and actually at first placed in the cemetery where he was. But that was the only statue that was removed in this exhaustive commission.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you hoped that you would be part of this committee of the mayor.
Yeah.
As a young activist.
I mean, sure. I mean, it would have been ideal, but what's more important than being part of the committee is making space for appropriate conversation. So they had public sessions in each of the 5 boroughs. I was able to testify at 4 of them. And then we held demonstrations and teach-ins in different parts of New York City where we were trying to make space for Black, Indigenous, people of color to talk about who they would want to see represented and to talk about why these monuments of hate should not stand in our public spaces. So above all, that was what was most important.
Okay, and then you had a solution for this. You have a plan for this. That's why you started this organization called Kinfolk. What the T-shirt you're wearing?
Yeah.
It's an app.
Yeah.
Tell us about this app.
For
because
sure.
right now you're a full-time social activist. That's what you do, and that's your full-time profession, helping your community and the brown community. And tell us about this Kinfolk.
Yeah, so we started in 2017. I co-founded the organization with my partners Idris Brewster and Micah Milner. And originally we were just trying to advocate for the removal of racist statues. And we had various teach-ins and performance pieces and demonstrations to try and realize that end. Once we learned about the political dynamics that were at play, where the statues were not going to be removed, we recognized that we can use augmented reality to put up our own monuments without permission.
Yeah.
And so that's where we developed Kinfolk. And it's a collection of Black and brown heroes that you ordinarily wouldn't learn about in school. And our goal was to geolocate them. So if you're standing at Columbus Circle, the phone knows it, and you can see a monument of someone like Toussaint Louverture, the general of the Haitian army during the revolution. But then with COVID, people couldn't go outside, and we realized that it would be more accessible if we could just place the monuments digitally on a coffee table, on a floor, any living room in the world. And so that's what we have.
Okay. Yeah, just for my audience, I will just explain them augmented reality because I also work with them. So augmented reality is, we also work with it at Museum of Goa. What we have done is we have created an app, and you just point the phone with this app to any object which triggers a statue. For example, I have put Mahatma Gandhi's statue on all currency notes of the world, major currency notes of the world. You just point with this app, the phone, to $1 or to £1 or €1, you will see Mahatma Gandhi. That's what we have done. So what we are doing is very similar. So where you just point the phone and then you see the sculpture of your hero. And your heroes are Black heroes and brown heroes who have fought the oppression, who have fought slavery, and many of them have emerged very successful. So we will like to show our audience some of these heroes who you have sort of glorified with your app and who you want to sort of bring back into the public memory vis-a-vis the statues of the so-called oppressors. So that's what you're doing. So I think let us start with one or two of the heroes whom you have sort of glorified in your Kinfolk app. But before that, something very interesting happened. You needed money for this. And you had to get some funding for this cause. How did this funding happen? I found that story very interesting.
Yeah, it was a blessing, honestly. There are a lot of different ways you have to keep the lights on, obviously, when you run a nonprofit, and especially in the aftermath of the George Floyd protests, there were foundations that set money aside for organizations that did the work of reclaiming narratives in the way that we do.
Through art.
Yes, through art and technology and education. And over the years, I developed a relationship with someone who I met through the Monuments Committee. His name is Justin Moore. And in time, he became a program officer with the Mellon Foundation. And they have an initiative called the Monuments Project, where they're giving money to projects that do similar work to us. And over time, we were able to get a 2-year grant to expand our Kinfolk Monuments Archive and to have events throughout the country where we're talking about challenging our narratives, both in public spaces and in the classroom.
So you got how much money for that?
So we received $1.8 million.
1.8 million. So it's almost about 10 crores of money was given by Mellon Foundation for this project. And with that money, he and his team were able to create this augmented reality heroes of the Blacks. We will soon see them. But changing the subject a little bit, you fasted in the Times Square for 21 days and then a few more days with liquid food, total 30 days.
30
Now, what made you do that? Who was your inspiration when you fasted?
So this is the full circle moment, honestly. A few days before we met, I was in Mumbai and I went to Gandhiji's house. And at the time in 2020, I was reading his autobiography, and I was reading about his approach to nonviolence. And when I was in his space, I felt something like very deep inside that said that like the message and the information that he had for me was not done. And then a couple days later, we met, and now we're sitting here right now. So it's not just Gandhiji, but rather, I mean, how do I explain it? I feel like in order to reach your higher self and your highest purpose, you have to look beyond the five senses. And the answers aren't always on a spreadsheet or very obvious. And so I have a meditation practice, and through fasting, I feel like I've reached various insights. And so my goal was just to put myself out there and inspire others to do whatever fundamental sacrifice they need to realize to figure out how we can make an equitable blueprint of New York City. So that's really what inspired it.
And you asked me one more question. I mean, I know that in many parts of the world, there are blacks who want Gandhiji's statue down because they believe that Mahatma Gandhi was against the black people, or they had some kind of, he thought they were lower people. That's what you thought. And then I explained to you that, well, Gandhi is an evolving personality. When he went to South Africa, maybe he thought that, okay, he was basically a leader of the Indians in South Africa, and he did not do much for the black people because he was not a leader of the black people anyway, but he did tend to them during the Zulu war. He was in the Red Cross, he did that. Are you convinced that Mahatma Gandhi was not against the black people?
Yeah, what really made it so concrete for me was comparing it to the situation of Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Malcolm X hated white people, called white people the devil, and wanted nothing to do with them. Up until he took his Hajj to Mecca, and then he saw white Muslims praying, and it changed his approach as far as how he saw that we're all part of one family. And so it makes so much sense in terms of, that might have been his perception earlier on in life.
Absolutely.
We evolve over time. We're dynamic creatures. And so I appreciate the insight. I never thought about it that way.
So I think it was lovely meeting you. I myself, when I was your age, I was a student activist, and any young man with kind of a fire in his belly to do something for the oppressed excites me. I love that, and best of luck. Personally, I do not know whether Mahatma Gandhi was alive, he would have wanted some statues down, but he would have definitely wanted celebration of the leaders who fought for the other side. Thank you for joining us, and I really wish we do create a world where everybody is equal and nobody is oppressed.
It's been such a pleasure. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.